welcome all to the first panel of the day about, it's background. It's the Youth Day today, so we have our 5 youth, and myself, I'm also under 35, so like to somehow count myself as a youth. But we're giving the youth perspective on the nuclear phase-outs that are happening in Taiwan, Germany, Belgium, and Spain, and how that nuclear phase-out squares in a world of increasing climate change risk and concern. So I'm Richard, your host. I'm from the UK, where we've got our own phase-out, but that's fortunately being met by new nuclear power plants. Today you're going to hear about phase-outs in other countries. So if we're going to go from left to right, starting with Angelica, if you could all just introduce yourselves, where you're from, and give a bit of background about the nuclear phase-out in your country.
Hi, everybody. I'm Angelica from Taiwan, and I am about as old as the nuclear power plants in Taiwan, so I would say I'm very youthful because they are coming up on their midlife extensions, but they indeed have so much more clean baseload to give. In the 80s, in fact, Taiwan was running on 50% nuclear power, although that has really dwindled. And the current government still wants to phase it all out by 2025. It's my mission to tell the people of Taiwan and convince the government that this is not a good idea because we're a small country and we cannot decarbonize fully without nuclear power. And I think coming to COP, it's been really, really inspiring to see so many countries try to get on the nuclear train. And I think it's really important that Taiwan doesn't get off because it might be a long time to get on it again.
Hi, Florian from Germany, as you can see. We have shut down reactors that are actually younger than me, which is partly my fault, which is partly the German government's fault. It's really sad. Germany is kind of the pariah in the nuclear world. We can still set a bad example, I guess, how not to do it. But, well, Andreas also has to say something. We're both from Germany, so I'll hand it on.
Yes, hi, I'm Andreas. I'm an environmental nuclear chemist. A bit of introduction was all right as well, right? So, as Florian said, Germany is one of the few countries which in the current situation are still holding on to their plans of phasing out the nuclear power plants. And about what we can learn from that, I think there's a lot of positive things that we can also learn from that, which is about the importance of communication and participation with the society, with the projects of building and establishing and keeping nuclear power active.
Hi there, I'm Emeric Massaut from Belgium. You might have seen me in one of the panels 2 days ago. I'm an aerospace engineer. I work in the railways, and I'm also an activist to keep our nuclear plants open. So what's a bit the history of Belgium, where we were one of the pioneering countries in Western Europe to develop nuclear energy. We're one of the founding nations of the MOX fuel, which is the recycling or what we call reprocessing of spent fuel to be able to reuse in existing nuclear reactors. However, in the early 2000s, for political reasons, the forming government wanted to ally with the Greens in order to form their government, and one of their conditions was to introduce a nuclear phase-out law. This was enshrined into law in 2003 as a nuclear phase-out law, so not as an energy transition law, with the end goal to phase out nuclear by 2025. Fast forward 20 years, we've invested massively in renewable energies, but of course these are, for a start, intermittent, but also, 20 years ago they were not as performant as today. So what is happening now is that we still get 50% of our electricity from nuclear power, and renewables only generate about 10%, and we're still due to close everything in 2025. Our activism, and with the help of many others, which are now getting closer to that deadline, are slowly realizing then it's not a great idea. We see it in Germany, price of electricity have risen so dramatically in the last few years. And we realize that our CO2 emissions keep rising. We've already shut down 2 of the 7 nuclear power plants that we have. Our CO2 emissions have, as we predicted, risen by 13% just in the last year because of that phase out. And we also see this in our neighboring country of Germany. And so we have to really push now so that they stop this phase out, this mad phase out by 2025, which is just around the corner. So yeah, this is the short introduction of what's happening in Belgium and what we're doing. And I'll hand over to my colleague Guillem from Spain.
Yes, hello. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to share this panel with you. So, just briefly, I'm Guillem Sanchis. I am a nuclear engineer in Barcelona and co-founder of Econucleares, which is the first environmental group in Spain explicitly in favor of nuclear energy and explicitly, specifically founded to fight the phase out in Spain, which does share quite a few parallels with these countries, especially I realize now Belgium, right? So Spain, just a tiny bit of context, was actually among the first nations in Europe and in the world to have nuclear energy. And we were well on track to be among the leading countries up to the point in which at the 80s we stopped building it, and then we had a moratorium. There's some Spain-specific circumstances that I'm sure we can discuss later. At the time we have 7, so right now we have 7 reactors in 5 locations, which provide a fifth of our grid. However, they are set to be closed within the next decade. So yeah, that's the introduction of the situation in Spain.
Great, thank you. And if throughout the panel anyone has any questions, do put your hand up. Oh, we've got a question straight up already.
So thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for sharing your stories. And it's also very interesting to see from different geographical areas how you have the same problem, the phase out of the nuclear capacity. And here my question is, how did you compensate, especially in Germany, the closed, phased out nuclear power plants? You still have the electricity demand, right? Especially the winter, now it is cold in Germany. Also the same in Belgium, same in Spain. How do you compensate that? Thank you.
So for Germany, we actually managed to, so Germany has kind of a split personality, right? We consider ourselves climate leaders and we build solar and wind like almost no other country, especially capacity-wise. And we actually managed to drive down the costs of solar so much because we were there early and we subsidized a lot. But on the other hand, we shut down the nuclear plants. And actually, if you look at the amount of electricity produced, clean electricity, it has been almost flat. Like the nuclear power plants supplied 30% of the energy at one point, and they got shut down while solar and wind came up. And in the end, it's almost flat for 22 years. So that's for the actual amount of electricity, but also the reliability. Yes. So of course, Germans have a word up for everything. Do you want to talk about Dunkelflaute? Yes. No. Okay, I'll talk about it. Our word for you've probably heard the word Dunkelflaute, which is. No? Okay, it's literally translated to doldrums, like doldrums. Like when the wind doesn't blow, the sun doesn't shine. And this situation can happen in Germany for weeks. And of course you need reliable power for this time when the solar is at like 1% or 0% capacity at night, of course, and wind is like at 1% capacity. Because so you need like a dual system. You need a second set of infrastructure. You need coal power plants. You need gas power plants. So actually, Germany has brought back coal power plants due to the energy crisis. But this has also been like a foreseeable problem because if you shut down the nuclear plants, well, all you're left as reliable power is gas and coal. That's the same in every country.
Yeah, I'd love to speak a little bit more to that. I'd love to add to that because Germany's story is so much like Taiwan. When President Tsai took over in 2016, she decided to go full scale, all speed ahead on renewable energy, building solar, building offshore wind, and we did build a lot of those capacities. But the problem is, every time she closes the reactor, that would set us back. We would build a lot of renewables to bring that clean energy back again, but then another reactor would close. So we were spending a lot of money and wasting a lot of time just to stay in the same place. And when President Tsai leaves office in, at the end of the year, or beginning of next year, she is going to leave Taiwan after being in power 8 years with a dirtier grid. And it's not just dirtier, it's more fragile, because when you replace nuclear power with renewables, it's not a one-to-one. And so Taiwan is also facing a power crunch in addition to not doing much on decarbonization. And yet she still feels like she's still seen as a green power president. And she made a pledge for Taiwan to go net zero by 2050. And to me, that's unbelievable, because we've actually gone backwards under her watch. So that makes me really sad.
So what we've heard so far is two countries with green politicians deciding rightfully to build as much wind and solar as they can, but making that all negligible by taking away nuclear. And those countries haven't seen any clean electricity additions. I want to hear quickly from Emeric, who I think has a slightly different story from Belgium, where instead of replacing nuclear with clean electricity, what have they done?
So in Belgium, we've invested massively also in offshore wind. I think we have 2.5 gigawatts of installed capacity, but so 2.5 gigawatts is about 2.5 nuclear power plants equivalent in Belgium, but they produce less than one nuclear power plant because the wind doesn't blow all the time. So this has been installed in the last 15 years, but indeed, because our phase out is so rapid, I mean, we closed the first 2 power plants last year, and the closing due date for the rest is in 2025. There's an abrupt shutdown of 50% of our electricity, and so to be able to enable this, the government had to subsidize the construction of new gas power plants, and this was under the watch of a green energy minister. So of course it's been a bit of a challenge, but they always managed to sell it to their politicians.
What's the problem with gas?
So good question, but they've always managed to sell it as a transition energy. So it sounds like great. I mean, what's wrong with gas? Well, gas first emits 400 times more CO2 than nuclear energy. So we increased our emissions by 13% just by the closure of these 2 power plants. But on top of this, the problem of gas is that you have to constantly import it. You cannot store it easily, at least in great quantities. And so when you have geopolitical situation and your suppliers are not as reliable or decide to cut you off, they really hold you by your energy standards. Yeah, well, I was going to say something else maybe, but I mean, you really start to have a problem where you're relying on external factors to keep you on with a constant supply of energy. And the great thing about nuclear power as well is that people say you also have to import uranium, which is true, but uranium is something that you can store. France has nearly 30 years of uranium in its own hands for the next 30 years. So because the power is so dense, you can easily store it. Gas, you cannot store it very easily in large scale.
Well, one thing I'd add to that is you mentioned gas has 4 times more emissions than nuclear. So to understand that, nuclear doesn't emit any direct emissions. So often misunderstood around the world. People think, all those smokestacks emissions, actually it's just steam, just water in the air. So there's no direct emissions from nuclear. What Emeric was referring to is the indirect emissions. So you have concrete to build these power plants, and that releases a tiny amount of emissions, less emissions, less life cycle indirect emissions, and even wind and solar. And that accounts to 400 times less emissions from the life cycle compared to gas. Andreas, did you have anything to say with your German perspective?
And that would include also the mining. So it is a whole life cycle thing. So the mining of the materials, which nuclear leads a tiny amount, the construction, and then the decommissioning as well.
No. Were there any other questions?
No, and in fact, well, it's fine.
Ladies first.
Hi all, thanks for being here. Fun panel. I was wondering to what you all ascribe the rationale that the Green parties and various folks who aren't yet sold on nuclear, why aren't they yet supportive? What are the various reasons for that?
I can start to answer about the Belgian situation. It's historical. The Green Party was founded upon the shutdown of nuclear energy. There was in the 1960s you had a push to, you had the 68 uprisings and the peace and love movement, I would call it like this, which was to phase out nuclear weapons, which is something I think we should do for sure. And somehow this has mingled with nuclear energy because there's nuclear in there. But actually, if you look at the world, these are decoupled. There's more nuclear nations that have nuclear power but don't have nuclear weapons, and yet you still have a couple of countries, I think. An example is North Korea, which has its nuclear weapon, but they still cannot power their own cities because they are not able to supply nuclear power. It can be decoupled for the simple reason that it depends what you invest in. It's not exactly the same technology. And the reason for the Green Party, because it's such a historical thing, it's very difficult to turn around and say, look, we were wrong about this. But I know that in the baseline of the party, the members, there is about 30 to 40% which actually support nuclear power and are very annoyed by the situation. But it's very tricky to say, well, we were wrong and we want to change this now. So yeah, that's at least for the Belgian situation.
Angelica.
I'd like to add to that, it's so true that the accident of history still haunts us today. Because in Taiwan, the nuclear power plants were built under Chiang Kai-shek, who was a dictator. And his opposition really coalesced around anti-nuclear because they were somehow the issue of nuclear mingled with the dictatorship. So he built the plant, so he got associated with them. And the opposition parties, unfortunately, really coalesced into a party in 1986, the year of Chernobyl. So that was in the air, so to speak. So it got written into their constitution. So ever since then, you've had this totally accidental and arbitrary line where the DPP, which is the party in charge right now and likely to be in charge, are anti-nuclear just because they used to be anti-nuclear. That is something that I personally really want to change. And then on the other side, of course, the KMT is pro-nuclear because they were pro-nuclear. I really want to break that association because it's actually within the values of the DPP that they're supposed to be more... there's something within the values of both parties to be pro-nuclear. With the DPP, it's their pro-environment. They want to take care of Taiwan and make Taiwan safe also, because right now Taiwan's very reliant on natural gas, which is not good for national security. And within the KMT, they're a very pro-business party, and so of course they should continue to support nuclear.
Yeah, if I could shortly add to that, because there's a really interesting parallel, or with the situation in Spain. So indeed, it was basically the same situation, right? Spain was a military dictatorship between 1939 and 1975, excuse me. And so there was also this association with between energy projects, not only nuclear, right? Hydro, there was a huge hydro build out, and the government, right? In the case of hydro, basically the government said, here goes the dam, let's move this village, let's move all these people, and it's not that they particularly got to vote on it. So there was this association between big power infrastructure and big authoritarian government, and I think that this factor was also fueling the reaction when the democracy started, together with the usual suspects, the environmental movement, Chernobyl, all of that.
Nice. But there is hope. Let's look to Finland. The Finnish Green Party has actually had a referendum, and the Norwegian Green Party too, I just learned. And I think in Poland maybe also
Finland as well, I think.
Yeah, Finland, Norway, and I think Poland is underway, or at least they have a majority. There's hope. The Green Party can change even.
So we're here for a climate conference, and it's encouraging that the countries, well, the political parties you'd expect to be most pro-climate change, stopping it, are changing their mind on nuclear. They're realizing it is the cleanest form of energy, and that if you want to stop climate change, you need every form of clean energy, including nuclear.
I have a question actually.
Here.
I mean, following up on your comment, I think in regard to nuclear, one is reminded of Winston Churchill's quote that people will do the right thing after exhausting all the alternatives. And I think that's likely what's going to happen. I have a question for Emeric. Thank you for updating us on the situation in Belgium. I live in Belgium, live in Antwerp, so I've experienced the ups and downs of the energy bills in the last few months. But you mentioned that new gas plants are being built. Of course, there's a lot of wind. Yes, there's a lot of wind in Belgium. How do the gas plants operate? Do they have to compensate for all the variation in the wind by increasing and decreasing their output continually? And does that affect the actual carbon emissions and the efficiency?
Great question. Sorry, it's too close. Great question. I think it's there's a few questions in there, but the thing is that gas plants do have to account for the ups and downs of the wind. They already have to do this today.
Yeah.
The thing is that we do have a base load in Belgium. I mean, even at night, we still have quite a strong industrial tissues.
Yep.
So the electricity consumption doesn't go to zero at night when everyone goes to sleep. Trains still drive through the night, freight trains and so on.
Yeah.
So there is a base load need for electricity.
Yeah.
So the subsidies for these new gas plants were for combined gas cycle gas turbines, which were always portrayed by our minister as being very efficient. They have more than 60% efficiency.
Yeah.
But this comes with the caveat that these are actually very bad at load following. So they're very
Right.
slow at load following. But the idea would be, anyways, because they would replace the nuclear plants directly, that they would be there for the base load.
Yeah.
And the current gas plants that are there for, like the
Yeah,
peaker
I
gas
see.
plant, the most
I
expensive
see.
one,
Right.
they're still there, and they're the old one. And actually, if you look back at the previous government, they, in the subsidy, the call for tender for subsidies, they were planning to add 7 to 9 gigawatts of gas capacity, but this was subsidized gas capacity, but this was mostly to replace the old ones with more efficient ones and peaker ones.
I see,
But
yeah.
because now the energy minister that actually had to execute this, well, she's a green energy minister,
Yep.
and it was not okay to say, well, we're going to build 9 gas power plants. So her amazing communication stunt is to say we reduced it from 7 to 9 new gas power plants, as the previous government wanted, to only 2, because now they're actually subsidizing the old one to stay alive, and they're subsidizing just the 2 new ones to replace the base load electricity. It's even crazier in terms of greenhouse gas emissions than what the previous government is, but it sounds good because they're only building 2 instead of 7.
Amazing. Just one quick question finally. Is there any discussion in Belgium about looking in future towards nuclear SMRs, small modular reactors?
Yeah, so indeed in Belgium, again, the current government, because there is some disagreement within the government about the future of nuclear, the only thing that the Green Party could agree is to say we will fund now research into SMRs, because that's actually an easy thing to do. We fund research, but the law of the phase-out is still there.
Okay.
So there's now subsidies for SMRs, and we have a very famous nuclear research center in Belgium called SCKCEN.
Right.
They are now being funded to investigate on how to do SMR. But I think sometimes it's a bit. It's always good to fund research, but it's a bit unfortunate that this is like some kind of throwaway money to like keep the hot potato away, whilst we are actually closing the existing working nuclear power plants. That's really the focus of my activism and our activism in Belgium to try and overturn this phase out.
Very good, thank you.
Great, and we're here to talk about fighting those nuclear phase outs. So I think we're going to go from left to right again, and I want to hear about sort of the advocacy that you're doing in your country and that others are doing to help stop these phase outs.
Yes, absolutely. In Taiwan, as in many countries, the mind of the people have changed ahead of that of the politicians. So we have a decent base of support to draw from, but now it's come down to how do we change the mind of the hardcore people who are still in power, and how do we break out of this partisan divide? I believe that we have a really critical window of opportunity that's coming up for Taiwan, because we still have 2 nuclear power plants that are operational, and life extension for those plants are essential, not just to for the grid strength of Taiwan, but also to keep nuclear energy alive and to keep the talent pool alive, keep the supply chain alive and ready for the next generation of nuclear. We have an election right now happening in January. We will know who the new president will be. And no matter who it is, I'm going to follow the same plan. I'm going to write a report that catalogs the energy resources we have in Taiwan and what the scenarios will be if we follow these different paths. And I hope that a new administration of whatever party is a great chance for a reset. And Taiwan can actually go in 2 very different directions. You know, if we go for the nuclear exit by 2025, we continue down this road, it's going to be bad because we are a manufacturing powerhouse. And everybody here has a cell phone that probably has a chip in it that comes from Taiwan. They rely on a huge amount of power, and it has to be very stable. So if we lose those nuclear power plants, I predict Taiwan's going to go down the path of less industrialization, and that's going to be very bad. But if we do decide to turn the corner, there's actually tremendous potential in Taiwan to not just keep the existing power plants, but to turn on more. And SMRs will be a very good fit for the kind of intense industrial production that is going on in the science parks of Taiwan. So fingers crossed.
Okay, since we're 2 people from Germany, let's play good cop, bad cop. So I'm more pessimistic than Andreas about the fight in Germany, and if it can still be turned around in the near term at least.
We can even do it like that, like directly comment.
Yes. Okay, so the thing is the power plants that have been shut down this year and last year, or the end of the year before, they can still be rescued. At least 5 of them can still be almost like flip the switch, almost like that. It's not as easy, of course. It takes about 2 years. It would be cheap. It would bring them back online as they were. They could still run for decades. They were like 35, or they are 35. They need new fuel. They need to have people to work in. But the thing is, with the current government, that's not happening. That won't be happening. The Green Party is too strong. And the next elections are in 2025. So that's a reason to lose hope a little in Germany, for German nuclear.
Well, I mean, it's always a matter of at what scales you think, I guess, because eventually, I think also the German Green Party will come around, because it's just people have realized it. We look at the polls, and you can just see that 2/3 of the population are clearly in favor of turning the nuclear power plants back on, as proposed by parts of the Liberal Party of Germany. The Liberal Party itself, by the way, the leadership of them hasn't come around yet, but it's the base of the party which actually has taken that initiative. So, I mean, what we're doing is we're a grassroots movement, basically. We're a group of 600 people that are in this club, and we organize street stuff, and we get very positive feedback on that, and we try to also address politicians, and with mixed results.
Well, the pessimistic side of this is that we are like a very small NGO or group. There's Replanet, there's Nuklearia, and that's it. And like Fridays for Future, Greenpeace, the Friends of the Earth Germany, the big groups, they are against nuclear. They are actually...
So far.
Yeah, but we have to fight them too. We have to fight the politics, we have to fight...
We have to convince them.
You wanna...
So, you use the word fight. But let me ask you this question. I have learned that you're representing a non-governmental organization. Is that correct? Okay. So how do you work with the public to involve them, to engage them, and to make them part of the decision making? Thank you.
Well, to be honest, we're really bad at that. we're pretty new. We have a lot of things to learn. We did protests out on the street in Berlin in front of the power plants. They weren't really that successful. We got a little bit of press coverage, but not a lot.
I wouldn't put it like that. I thought it was pretty good.
But we still have to improve on that. Yes, that's true.
Andreas, tell me more about the report you wrote. And my understanding is the report that you helped write on restarting, the possibility to restart German nuclear. It even got covered in the New York Times. They retweeted it.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear facts that the nuclear power plants can still be turned on, and I mean, we were working on this report to illustrate to the government, actually research, talk with the utilities, electricity utilities, and talk with them at what the actual state of the nuclear power plants are, and try to get this information out, because frankly there's just a lot of people who don't care about this information, because for them the topic is through. Like, it's for them, they're dead. You know, it's nothing can be done. So we're just trying to put this information out there, basically. So, but I want to let those guys.
What are you guys doing to fight the nuclear phase out in your country?
Right. So just a thing that Angelica mentioned, right? Regarding put another way. So our policy is quite similar to what Germany did, right? And people like to say, you know, we're basically following down the path of Germany. People we like to tell them, well, it's actually worse. Germany at least has coal, right? It's bad coal. It's like the worst coal, basically, if I understand correctly, in terms of pollution. But at least they have them. You know, they have the option of removing old towns, mining the coal underneath to keep the lights on. We do not. The alternative to nuclear will be natural gas, basically imported either via pipeline from the north of Africa or via LNG via ship, right? So that is to say, we are pretty sure all 7 reactors will not be turned off, and that is just a matter of physical reality. So if one does the numbers, basically the grid falls off on its face without the 7 nuclear reactors. And at the end of the day, this is not a decision at that point, that is only a matter of policy. So the grid administration has the ability to veto, for instance, the closure of a plant if they estimate that it would very likely lead to blackouts. So our work focuses more on not on how to avoid all 7 to be closed, because that will just not happen, but whether the decision to stop shutting them down happens before we shut down the first 1 or 2 or afterwards. So whether we go down the right path before the damage is done or after the damage is done. And we know, how people tend to not notice something like infrastructure, like the grid, until it doesn't work. No one thinks where their water comes from until it stops coming from there. We have polls that show that the public opinion is slowly shifting away from mostly anti-nuclear, which was the case in a lot of Europe just some years ago, to close to parity or even more than that in favor. But again, policy changes are slow. There's a lot of inertia. A lot of people at this point who are implementing this policy are not convinced anti-nuclear people. They're just people who are just following the work that was laid down. They don't want to too much trouble. If that's the plan, that's the plan. And at the end of the day, we think that in a democracy like Spain, the policy at the end of the politicians rather at the end of the day respond to public opinion. If we can not even change their mind, but get the topic talked about, because another thing that we notice when we go around and we do that out on the street, we ask people, what do you think about nuclear power? The most popular answer is not, oh, I like it, or I dislike it, or I'm afraid of it. It's, yeah, I don't know. I don't really think about it that much. So the most people are not in favor or against. They're, again, you don't really think about it as long as it works. So as long as we get people to talk about it, to think about, oh, well, yeah, where does my power come from? Come to think of it, my power bill has been going up, and it has. Then we think that at the end of the day, this is the incentive the policymakers will respond to. So we are focusing on that.
I'll try to respond to your question about activism and our fight. Just bouncing back on this, breaking the taboo, making this discussion open to be talked about. So what is our fight? So what? Basically, I'm one of the activists who organizes demonstrations and communication campaigns. But unfortunately, one of the things that these activist movements are usually very small. There's not that many people interested to actually do actions on the street. But what we've seen in the last few years is that it has broken the taboo. That's the nice thing, is that when I started this around 2020, we organized already a few what we called Stand Up for Nuclear. It was called the Nuclear Pride Festivals. It was small. Not many people were interested. The press did not talk about it. But that movement has grown. Every time we organize a new one, more people came. And eventually, when they closed the first nuclear power plant, we were there the day of the closure, and we had press coverage, national press coverage. And when they shut down the second power plant, we had more than 39 press reference articles that was stating this. And mostly in Belgium, they were either stating the facts, so just that there were some activists who were against the closure, or even positive towards our movement. So we see that breaking the taboo, being able to talk about it, is actually one of the most important things. A bit like to reflect on what Guillem said, a lot of people, they're a bit agnostic about it, but usually it's in the saying of safety. If people say, well, the real activists like the Greens, they are against it, it must be for a good reason, and I would side to the side of, I don't know, so probably for being careful. If we can do it with renewables, why not? But now that we're talking about it, people are realizing, well, what does that mean? Well, that means that when it's not windy, prices go skyrocket. At night, for example, in winter in Europe, when it's not windy, price skyrocket. People feel this. And now they feel that, okay, well, what is the alternative? Nuclear or gas or coal? And this breaking the taboo is what I think our fight and our activism is really helping, and making the discourse being a bit more nuanced, which was before even the press was always negative, because, well, news usually has to be sensational. So if it's to say, well, the plants are running and it's fine, it's not news. But when there's an accident, or there was an emergency shutdown, or there was this, or there was that, the press was always talking negatively. And now, because of our activism, I think it changes the discourse. We're talking about it because it's a thing already to talk about nuclear. And that's why I'm here at the COP. And I hope that answers most of your questions.
So I think to summarize, it's about moving the Overton window. So to explain the term, most people think of this much to this much, but what we're doing as a movement is getting people to think this much about nuclear. And suddenly, when these people see, oh, there's people who are really pro-nuclear, and they're young, and they're energetic, and they're positive, suddenly these people might shift their views. They see, there's people out there, it's all right to be pro-nuclear. We don't need to be the same as everyone else. And that's, I think, what a lot of the movements around the world are doing. And it's not about being how big your group is. I don't think any of us are expecting to see tens of thousands of people marching for nuclear. That's the aim, but we're not expecting that next year. What's important is moving the Overton window. And we have other advocates around the world, in Norway, Australia, Denmark, who get great press coverage. In those countries, they're a lot stricter on nuclear. There's a complete ban on nuclear. And suddenly, the media's taking note. Did you have something to add, Emeric?
Yeah, very short thing is, what is also great that we see here at the COP is because the whole world comes and meets. I meet activists who are doing the same thing as I'm doing all over the world. And this gives me even more energy to do it, because we see that the fight is actually worldwide, even though we don't necessarily talk to each other. And here we do, and we realize that this fight is really everywhere. And it's all about breaking this taboo.
Yes, and to tie into that, and yes, we are young, as the nuclear reactors show, 35 years is about, even performing better than ever. So we should not be... Right. So just to tie into that, there is a role, of course, of people like us, activists. You know, we're amateurs. We're doing that in our time off, basically, right? Most of us. But of course, it has to also be the industry, and any other industry knows that, right? Look at the wind industry, the solar industry. They have industry forums. They reach out. They're like Google clean energy. What comes up? You know, wind and solar. Nuclear reactors do not come up, despite being in many figures as clean, if not cleaner. There has to be a role of the industry to stand up for itself, and we have not seen that historically, and that has been a big part of the problem. So, right? So when you know the likes of Greenpeace and such, right? The green movement, so-called green, said nuclear is dangerous, nuclear is dirty, we need to shut them down. Who was on the other side of that? No one was. And so therefore, nuclear phaseouts happen. There is a role that has to be filled by the industry, and this is why it's so encouraging for us to be here, representing, you know, the Net Zero initiative led by industry, hoping that it's a small start to a much bigger representation of the nuclear industry, the companies, the countries, explaining, defending the crucial role of nuclear power to decarbonize, for energy security, for growth, right? It's not only rich countries like the ones we're representing. We've been talking these days also with representatives of countries from Africa and other places who want to growth, and they want to do it with nuclear power. So there has to be this key part of the industry together with people like us.
Was there any other questions from the crowd? Oh, over here.
Good afternoon. I've just joined. So, you say you're like a pressure group for the use of nuclear, which is interesting. I'm an ecological economist, by the way. I'm not necessarily against nuclear, but who are you? What's driving you? Are you working for a nuclear industry, or are you in industry?
No, most of us are just activists.
Well, you're a nuclear engineer. Your dad works for Nuclear Research Center in decommissioning. So I've worked in the Nuclear Research Center as well, in waste commissioning.
I'm just a data nerd. I like the numbers. I follow the numbers, which leads me to nuclear.
I am actually a reporter in offshore wind, and I started working in energy because I believe it was the most important topic of our time. And when I first got into offshore wind, I was so passionate about it. I really thought this is what we have to do to save the world.
Okay, so I just
But
one
before,
more question.
but before, can I finish the answer? But even though I'm an offshore wind reporter and I gained some prominence in Taiwan for doing that, I realized that it wasn't going to solve our problem. Offshore wind and solar, because it is an intermittent source of energy, wasn't going to solve our problem. And that's why, at a cost of great professional sacrifice to myself, because the renewables network people are not very accepting of nuclear energy, I had to come out of the closet and say, yes, I am pro-nuclear. And I come to COP and I'm doing this. And of course, I hope to report on nuclear energy in the future. I advocate and make that my living. But I'm doing this at a professional cost because I really do believe that this is the answer for us. This is what we need to actually decarbonize.
Angelica, to clarify, when you say wind and solar won't help us, do you mean it won't be the complete answer?
Absolutely. I think that wind and solar should definitely be a part of the answer, but it won't be the complete answer.
Thank you. That was interesting because you're talking about the problems with the other forms of energy, and so we're perhaps being impractical. But what I'd like to ask is, all forms of energy do some ecological damage. So electric cars, we're going to need lots of mining of lithium, infrastructure. Windmills, there's been criticism about them being put out at sea and the harm it's doing there. So where does nuclear fall in this, looking at this perspective?
Well, there have been a couple of life cycle analysis, like reports about the ecological damages of different energy sources and how they compare over the total lifetime of a plant. From the mining to the building to maintenance, just producing the power, till the plant is shut down, till the plant is deconstructed, everything is cleared away, and there's like green grass left. And these tell us that nuclear is actually the most ecological form of power, like the one with the least footprint, which is the reason for that is mostly the huge amounts of energy, the energy density of nuclear. You have a lot of energy in a very small place. So you don't need as many resources, materials.
The report we recommend everyone look up is by the UN ECE, which stands for European Commission on Energy, or something like that, by the UN. And it covers life cycle carbon dioxide emissions, for which nuclear is lower than wind, solar, and the other energies. It covers rare earth material use, again, for which nuclear is the lowest. This is all per kilowatt hour, so comparing one form of electricity with the other on a sort of even metric. Then the third way is around land area. Again, nuclear performs, I think, 200 to 400 times better than the other forms of clean electricity. The only metric that nuclear comes out worse on in the report is water use. So nuclear is a thermal power plant and needs water to cool it down. Fortunately, for most nuclear power plants, or at least in the UK, every power plant, that water comes from the sea and therefore isn't going to run out. You put the water in the power plant, some goes up into the clouds and some goes back down into the sea. And it's just clear water. It doesn't ever touch the radioactivity, so there's no issue there. So yeah, those are the key metrics.
Thank you. If I understand correctly, nuclear is the only high-density source of energy which doesn't produce lots of CO2. All the other ones that are supposedly low carbon are low density. They get it from the air, get it from the sun, get it from the sea, and it's all expensive, it's highly distributed, it's loads of wire. So if you're talking about high-density energy, like power stations, nuclear is the only game in town. The only alternative to that, which is carbon-free, is your windmills.
Geothermal is also very dense.
Yeah.
About the water use, actually, we are in a desert. This city is surrounded by desert, and still this country has built a new nuclear power plant with 4 reactors, 3 are operational already. In the desert, of course, it's close to the sea. So that's enough. If you're close to the sea, water use is not an issue.
Yeah, so just the way we like to put it, nuclear is the only clean, reliable, scalable source as the technology stands today. We'll see about advanced geothermal, but as the technology stands.
I didn't get your name, but did I hear you say there are still 2 reactors? Can I ask you which 2?
Taiwan has 2 reactors left. They are the 2 at the southern end of the island, the Ma'anshan reactors 1 and 2.
This conference has got a real emphasis on youth, and I'm trying to fit in, but I worked on Qinshan.
Oh.
So
we believe they can be brought back. Qinshan can be brought back. I'll talk to you later about it, but every single reactor in Taiwan can be started or restarted or life extensioned. Yeah.
Emeric.
I just wanted to add one thing about the activism of Madam's question, but but today I work for the Belgian Railways for the last 10 years. So my activism, I'm here literally. I took a holiday. I'm here on my free time. A lot of this nuclear movement does this because we think it's wrong. I will just say a very small anecdote about one of my hobby. I do gliding at the border with Germany. Gliding is this when you go in the air in a plane without an engine, and we see the effects when there's an inversion layer of the coal-fired power plants, which are just behind the border in the region of Aachen, and we see the smudge of the emissions from coal and all the pollutants that stay and stagnate in the air on the German side. And this is where I want to give still a slight bit of positive note and a slight bit of hope. We're here, so I'm here as an activist really because I want to fight this and to keep our clean electricity generation and stop burning coal, stop burning fossil fuels. However, I see that it's turning around, and maybe Germany was a bit the kid that had to do it badly, and it's sad for me because it's really my direct neighbor, but it will show the world what not to do. They have invested massively in in renewables. They have more wind capacity than they actually need. If it's very windy in Germany, there's more wind than the electricity need at peak loads. But Germany can't even use it because the transmission grid isn't there. And also because you can never shut down completely thermal power plants. So even coal, you cannot put them to zero for a short amount of time. So they need to keep them running at a low power. And so it keeps emitting. But I want to say this as a bit of a hope as well, because even though it's the thing not to do, maybe as Andreas was saying also before, there is hope even to reactivate nuclear and to have a nuclear renaissance even in Germany.
So I want to bounce off that. You talk about hope. I think the three standout countries I know about are Japan, South Korea and Sweden. All those three, they had lots of nuclear. They politically decided to reduce their nuclear, and now they've changed their minds again and want nuclear again. And Sweden's decided to increase their nuclear capacity by something like 4 times.
2 large reactors by 2035 and 10 large reactors worth by 2045.
Yeah, and Japan wants to restart their old reactors, and South Korea is back to building reactors. Can we go through all of you guys and hear what the sort of messages of hope you hear from those countries and how you think that applies where you live?
I see a lot of hope, basically because Taiwan doesn't have many alternatives. Our grid is going to falter if we go ahead and shut down those last new nuclear power plants. I think this will happen in time for sanity. What I don't hope doesn't happen is somehow we keep it together until we're like Germany and we shut it all down. The thing about nuclear is, as long as you keep that flame alive, we can get going again. But that's the message of hope I want to leave everybody with. The rubber's going to meet the road, and we're going to do the right thing. That's what I believe.
If I can quickly bounce on what you were saying, and I'll let you speak after, but on the Sweden and what was the other country?
South Korea.
South Korea and Japan. What I find very sad about what they're doing is that they've shut down. What they've shut down is going to stay shut down, and now their plan is to like re-increase with new nuclear power plant. It's a very expensive endeavor. What my hope is for my country and also for Spain is that we are able, with our activism, to prevent this shutdown and still increase our capacity. Because what they're going to do in Belgium today, what the current plan is, we're going to shut down more than 2 gigawatts of nuclear power in Doel, which is a city near Antwerp, and 20 kilometers away in the Netherlands, they are now procuring 2.5 gigawatts of new reactors for 20 billion euros. This is the current number. So that means that 20 kilometers away, we are building a $20 billion reactor to replace just what we shut down a year, like right now. So what we need to do is to keep what's existing. They can run another 20 to 40 years and also increase what they're doing in the Netherlands, and I hope in Belgium, maybe Spain and Germany as well in the future.
Yeah, all the good news from other countries are perceived in Germany. They are covered. Like, for example, this COP, the announcement of tripling nuclear until 2050, the signatories, like 20-something countries. This is in the news, and people are starting to sink in that maybe we are not the smart ones here. Like, maybe we are not the only ones who are smart, the only country here. So that's maybe a good thing.
Right, so what gives me hope at the end of the day is that, it sounds a bit trite, but because truth is on our side, right? The numbers are on our side. And I do think that, following up on the quote, we will do the right thing, even if it's after all the bad choices have been tried out first. At the end of the day, nuclear has no competitor in terms of clean, reliable, large-scale electricity. It's a matter of when do we notice finally and how much damage has been done, which, if we can have a way about it, will not be any at all.
Can I still say something?
Yeah.
I had to think a moment just to think what after what Florian said, what I can still add to that. So I think it's just like I think I said on Tuesday, don't let a good crisis go to waste. Basically, So I think this is a huge opportunity also in Germany, basically to learn from the past and kind of reimagine the industry in a certain way. because communication and engagement of the public in the questions of energy production and distribution seem to have been the thing which frankly have been neglected in the past, and this was the only way how we could have basically arrived at the point where we are today in Germany, was that just simply the communication and the engagement of the public has just been catastrophically neglected. And I think this is a big chance to learn and reimagine that.
Gentleman in green.
Thank you. Just following up on your comment and your colleague, I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on how much bandwidth there is out there for the nuclear debate, because these arguments have gone round and round for decades and decades. We all know about how illogical the anti-nuclear position is, how much radioactivity there is in bananas or Brazil nuts, how sitting on an aeroplane gives you way more radioactivity than going in a nuclear power plant, or how spectacle of nuclear workers dressed up in protective suits decontaminating waste, where the concentration of radioactivity in the bodies of the workers is higher than in the waste that they're decontaminating. These things are all out there. The argument has no logic, but is anyone interested? I mean, is there still a debate out there? I mean, of course, things like that energy price instability might reanimate the argument. Might people think, yes, we really have to get energy right. Bad things happen if we get it wrong. So maybe, what are your thoughts on that? Is there a debate still there?
Well, I actually have to. The crisis thing is very true. Like, don't let a good crisis go to waste. The energy crisis has changed the discussion 180 degrees, at least in Germany, because of rising power prices. People weren't so concerned about climate change because it's not immediate. It's like a far-away problem that might, some people even believe, might not happen. But the energy prices, they hurt you now, and rising gas prices, rising electricity prices, that kind of thing, that made people rethink the Energiewende, the German energy transition. Is it really working? Is it really getting us to the place we want to be, or is it just going to increase our electricity prices forever until we can no longer afford heavy industry, even our own heating in the house?
Did that answer your question?
Yes, indeed.
I'd like to add to that. I'd like to sort of flip the question around. Does fear of waste and radioactivity actually matter? Because what the public opinion polls show is, yes, the vast majority, something like 80% of people around the world are worried about those two things. But if you just look at those groups of people, they still have strong support, a net support for nuclear's use. So you can both be worried about the safety and the waste and support it. A bit like a lot of people are scared of flying. You know, they know if they want to have a nice holiday the other side of the world, it's the only option they've got for that money. Similarly, when fighting the climate crisis, you have to use nuclear. The other element is, just like with flying, people know that the numbers are that it's safe, but it's an intrinsic emotional fear, which is completely understandable. But, you know, they still support it because the numbers say it is. So I think fear of safety and waste doesn't necessarily have to correlate with support for nuclear use.
I'd also like to add to that it's up to us to come up with new narrative that increase the bandwidth for the discussion. For instance, as an advocate in Taiwan, of course, I understand that the fastest and most, in a way, the most consequential, highest leverage point action we can do is to do the life extensions for the existing nuclear power plants. But I also make sure I mention the next generation of nuclear because I want to give people that hope, and that elevates the conversation.
If I can very, very shortly to the gentleman's question about bandwidth, I think it has reactivated the discussion. Not only our what I see is that in the last 3-4 years that I've been doing this, in the past people didn't care, like you said, but now this activism has changed the way that the press looks at it, and there is now a discussion which wasn't the case before. So I think it has changed.
So I think, to your point, one of the new developments is innovation in nuclear. So until now, it's been assumed by people having this kind of discussion that other sources of energy can innovate, but nuclear cannot. And to some extent, there's some truth to that due to the complicated institutional situation that nuclear is in, but it's clearly innovating now. And I think that is one of the important myths to get rid of.
Great. We're running to the end of our session. The session was on fighting nuclear phase-outs in the name of climate change. I want to quickly get some closing remarks. If there's any questions in the crowd, you can ask them later once we're done with this session. So, final remarks. I want 5 words when you think your nuclear phase-out will be ended, and sort of how positive you are about the future.
I have big hopes for 2024. That's the year that I hope we'll at least get the 2 working nuclear power plants life extension. And then I just want to add that this is a global fight. And a victory anywhere for nuclear is actually a victory for all of us.
Despite the renaissance in nuclear, Germany looks a little bleak right now, but you can only fight the laws of physics and the rationality of it for so long.
So my words would be, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, no, lost a bit my train of thoughts, but so in Belgium we have an election in 2024 as well. All our plants are due to close in 2025. Because now it's really a topic, because we're talking about it at COP, there was a lot of media attention even about the announcement that was made here at COP. So I really do have a hope that now is the moment. Today is the renaissance for nuclear now.
I think for COP29 we'll be talking about the end of the phase out in Spain.
Great.
Here.
Good.